We have an awesome bathtub. It's a jacuzzi tub meant for my muscles. And we have a wonderful ramp so I can get up and down by myself. The light switches, I can reach them now. I have wider doors so my chair can get through.
They were given the van, and when the van died, they got another similar vehicle.
Here's the keys to the house.
Thank you.
And here's the keys to the car that was donated.
They were also given things like free flights to Gypsy's medical appointments or conferences. As far as Gypsy being sick, you almost wouldn't think that she was. A lot of people who had a lot less wrong with them would probably have done a lot more moaning and wailing about the whole thing.
Here she is having tubes being put into her, having needles and treatments, and it was incredibly inspiring to see how Gypsy responded to these conditions. It was unreal.
Dee Dee would always hold Gypsy's hand. You know, it was like, I don't know, it was almost like, you know, just if I squeeze it, you'll know what to say. I mean, that was just so strange to me. Just to feel it now, I think that was really strange. Even in videos I've seen since then, I'm like, yep, it's the same thing. It's like she's holding her hand. I mean, now it was maybe a control thing.
The hand holding and the tight hugs is a way of asserting mastery over another person and saying, you're not free. You're under my control at all times, even in relatively benign situations like our being photographed, getting the Habitat for Humanity home. You know, those are innocuously happy occasions, but they were also occasions where Dee Dee reasserted her mastery over Gypsy.
My mom had me. If we were in a group of friends, you know, if I said something that I wasn't supposed to, she'd squeeze my hand. And I know, zip it. I was just afraid, just too afraid.
In almost every picture and video, Dee Dee is either holding Gypsy's hand or hugging her. On the outside, they look like a loving family, but it was all a fraud.
This is actually kind of the first time I've been honest. Besides being honest, you know, with my attorneys. Even that, I haven't been completely honest with them, so.
Gypsy is asked how she would describe her mom.
Unique. I mean, I used to always think that maybe she's a little overprotective. And so if I had to say one word about her, it would be overprotective.
How old are you? You're 1? And where's your cranial? Very good. And where's your findalis? Yes. Very, very good.
I really didn't think any abuse was going on. It's like when you're abused, but you live that way your whole life, you don't really know that you're being abused. You don't know any different.
Looking at the open ocean now, and it's beautiful.
I knew that I was different, or my life was different from other kids, but people thought of us as, you know, the sweetest mother-daughter family ever. The best two people in the world.
Imagine growing up knowing that you were adopted, and 60 years later, when you take an ancestry DNA test, you find out that your birth mom was the victim of one of the most notorious cold cases in American history. Richard Hanchett was born in 1958 in Michigan, and he was immediately given up for adoption by his birth mother. In 2018, Richard, who still lived in Texas, decided to take an ancestry DNA test, and he was immediately matched with relatives from his birth mother's family. He connected with them and even went down to Tennessee to finally meet them. And that's when Richard learned that his birth mother, Ruth Marie Terry, had been missing since the early 70s. For decades, her family searched for her, but they were unable to find her, until 2022. In October of this year, the FBI and Massachusetts State Police announced that nearly 50 years later, they had finally identified the victim of the oldest unsolved homicide case in Massachusetts, the Lady of the Dunes. and the Lady of the Dunes was identified as Ruth Marie Terry. On July 26, 1974, a little girl was hiking with her family when she came across the body of a mutilated woman. Her hands were missing. Police believe this was an attempt to get rid of her fingerprints so they couldn't identify her, and her head was nearly severed. Detectives searched motels and rooming houses and even reviewed thousands of missing persons cases from Massachusetts. They also used clay models to recreate what the Lady of the Dunes might have looked like. Her case unfortunately went cold, and some even speculated that she was the victim of the South Boston gangster Whitey Bulger. In 2000, authorities had her body exhumed to extract DNA, but it wasn't until recently that they were able to use genealogy testing to identify her. This is the same technique that was used to identify the Golden State Killer. Now flash forward to November of this year, authorities announced that they had a new development in the investigation. They had now identified the Lady of the Dunes. Now they had to identify who her killer was. Authorities revealed they were seeking information on a man who was already deceased. This man was known as Guy Rockwell Moldavan. Guy was an antique dealer, and he was actually arrested in 1960 in connection to the disappearance of his former wife and her daughter. Remains believed to be theirs were found in their Seattle home. He only served a suspended sentence, so he actually got released in 1962. Now, court records indicate that Guy and Ruth actually got married in Reno, Nevada in February of 1974, just months before she was killed. Now that they have her identity, this case is being treated as a homicide investigation by the Massachusetts State Police and FBI. The public is actually being asked to review Terry's Seeking Information poster. This includes newly released photos and a little bit more information. This case is still ongoing.
Who was the most prolific serial killer in the US? Is it BTK? Is it Gacy? Is it Bundy? How about Gary Ridgway? Nope. Try again. In the number 1 spot is Samuel Little. He's responsible for killing at least 93 women between 1970 and 2005. That's more than Bundy, the Zodiac Killer, and Richard Ramirez combined. So how did he avoid detection and kill so many for so long? Sam Little was a drifter who moved across the country for decades, entering various neighborhoods where poverty, drug addiction, and unsolved murders are common. Little targeted marginalized and vulnerable women who are often involved in prostitution and addicted to drugs. During his interviews, he was quoted saying, "I'm not going to go over there in the white neighborhood and pick out a little teenage girl. That's the kind you get busted for. I stayed in the ghettos. I won't go in your world." Little's method of killing didn't always leave signs that the death was a homicide. A former boxer, he usually stunned or knocked out his victims with powerful punches and then strangled them. He punched with such force that when he struck one of his victims in the abdomen, he broke her spine, according to an autopsy report. With no stab marks or bullet wounds, many of these deaths were not classified as homicides, but attributed to drug overdoses, accidents, or natural causes. Their bodies often went unidentified, and their deaths were not thoroughly investigated. The Los Angeles Police Department dubbed him the choke and stroke killer, as he would often strangle a woman while pleasuring himself. He allegedly took offense at being called a grapist, as he admitted to erectile problems which made intercourse impossible. For decades, Little was in and out of jail serving less than 10 years, though he had amassed nearly 100 arrests for crimes that included fraud, shoplifting, solicitation, armed robbery, aggravated assault, driving under the influence, and sexual assault. In 2012, after being extradited to California on a narcotics charge, police collected his DNA, which matched 3 unsolved murders between 1987 and 1989. He was convicted of these murders and sentenced to life in prison without parole in 2014. In 2018, Little was willing to talk as he was hoping to move to a new prison. He preferred the Ector County Jail in Texas to the noisy, often chaotic environment of a Los Angeles County prison. He eventually confessed to a total of 93 murders that spanned 19 states from California to Florida between 1970 and 2005. Little remembered his victims and the killings in great detail. He remembered where he was and what car he was driving. He even drew sketches of the women, which were included in the public FBI dataset. Little died in custody in 2020 at age 80. So what do we know about Little's childhood? Little was born in June 1940 in Reynolds, Georgia. Authorities believe that Little's mother gave birth to him when she was 16 and in jail. Little states she was a teenage prostitute who abandoned him on the side of the road. Little was brought up by his paternal grandmother in Lorain, Ohio. Little is known about what happened in that childhood home, as attempts to contact the family have been unsuccessful. He attended Hawthorne Junior High School, where he allegedly had difficulties with discipline and achievement, already showing signs of conduct disorder. By his own account, Little began having sexual fantasies about strangling women as a child, starting when he saw his kindergarten teacher touch her neck. As a teenager, he collected true crime magazines depicting the choking of women. Little's first crime was the theft of a bicycle when he was 13, landing him in the boys' industrial school in Lancaster. His whole thing was shoplifting, said a Mississippi detective. He shoplifted a city for 3 or 4 days and then would take the items to drug areas and sell them. Once he was done stealing, he would go out in the early mornings and look for women. According to authorities, Little was a charismatic psychopath, showing no sign of remorse as he discussed the killings. Investigators stated he was matter-of-fact about his actions and sometimes even chuckled about them. He once stated, "God made me this way, so why should I ask for forgiveness? God knew everything I did." So I'm curious to hear why you guys think we haven't heard much about Sam Little or his 93 victims. Why do people like Gacy or Bundy get all the attention?